I mean, we are a group of um, professionals from different disciplines. We actually started two ventures, each of which would require a huge team to run and manage, but we were lucky enough to find the right people throughout our journey to have that or to bring those two ventures to life. One is Archetype Foundry, which is a product development and research studio. We try to focus on R&D and bringing products, new products, ideas to life. We try to support startups, individuals, university students, anyone with an idea to help them develop it through stages from the early concept to at least a stage where it is ready to be taken for manufacturing. It's a very difficult and tough journey. Today we'll try to talk about it. The other venture is Fab Lab. I'm sure most of you have heard of a Fab Lab, but I will try to tell you what's a Fab Lab in a very small or few words. So it all started with this program. It's a graduate level program in MIT. It was called How to Make Almost Anything. The idea behind it is giving people the tools and the necessary skills to start converting their ideas, in most cases hardware ideas, into reality. So it is a course that helped everyone. Didn't assume that people come with a technical background or anything, but anyone could start and take this course. It was an intensive course. It took 20 weeks, and people throughout those weeks will learn how to build a prototype of their projects, starting with the simple skills of designing 2D and 3D and using all the sophisticated electronic production tools, and later building the whole form factor, packaging, and everything. We have run this program in Bahrain. This is our fourth year to run this program. We are lucky to have Tamkeen on board with us in this program. This year we managed to get 7 scholarships through Tamkeen. We got 1 scholarship from the Fab Foundation. And we are actually supporting students in Bahrain, Saudi, and in Egypt. So it's a very good program now for, I mean, in terms of the impact we have noticed to the students. Many of our students became members in our team and are contributing significantly. So in a nutshell, those are the Fab Labs that exist around the world. So basically from that simple course in MIT, we have more than 1,500 Fab Labs around the globe, and most of them share a few things in common, or have those simple things in common. They all are part of a global network that shares knowledge. They run a distributed educational model program, which is basically the Fab Academy. So Fab Academy partially is perfect for the current times, because most of the lectures are conducted online. The professor is in MIT. The students are distributed all over the globe. But there is the element of local support and local execution using the tools. And the most important element, I think, is basically identifying local challenges. So each Fab Lab identifies certain local challenges and work on them to within the Fab Lab network support, and start to find solutions for their local needs. So they would collaborate either locally or globally, but eventually they will try to bring that all within their local context. So now we will take you into a short tour in, I mean, what a Fab Lab looks like. And we are fortunate enough that we have, we are members, we are collaborating with the Ministry of Youth and Sports. The collaboration goes back to 2016, but we started in January running the space they have in the youth center, and basically the center is supposed to support both startups and individuals. So Ali might share with you now his video, and I think his video will show you exactly what's happening in the space.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rajaei. I'll just take you for a very quick tour. I hope it's going to be clear. Of course, we have been collaborating now over 4 years with the Ministry of Sports and Youth in Bahrain. And first of all, in setting up their Fab Lab. And from the beginning of this year, we started actually joining our efforts with them. And we started working from the Fab Lab at the Innovation Center in Hassan. So all what you see here is basically in the Innovation Center in Hassan. I'll just take you on a very quick tour on some of the equipments and machineries that we have here and what we can do with these things. So what you see here is basically what we call milling machines. These are CNC-based machines that we mainly use for two purposes. One of them is to do the basically circuit boards. So all what you see here, for example, is actually designed and milled on these milled machines. So the students actually learn how to design their circuits and then fabricate them. We also use it for precise or precision casting purposes. So these are all molds and casts that we can use for developing or producing different products. Now we go here to this corner is our laser machine corner. And this is basically a laser machine that can cut in different mediums like cardboards, wood, and leathers, and some other materials, acrylics. And the students can actually start experimenting with their ideas and try to make different articles. For example, this is just a shape of an airplane that was cut in 2D and then was converted to 3D. You can convert something that was rigid, that was an acrylic or a plastic sheet, with a certain design that you can cut on it, then basically it becomes something flexible. So this gives the students the mediums or the tools to experiment with their ideas. Here we have some what we call vinyl cutters. These vinyl cutters are used for different things like making stickers, but we can also make some kind of advanced flexible circuits. So this is actually a circuit that is flexible. You can bend it and you can use it for different things like antennas and other things in the electronic circuits. In this corner, we just have our electronic circuit bench. Here where the students or the participants basically test their circuits. They actually do basically the setup or the mounting all the microelectronic items on their circuit boards, and they do testings for them. In this corner, we have our 3D printing area. And of course, you can see different projects done by students that we have here or the participants. This is a robotic hand developed by one of the students who was learning on the 3D printing machine. We are doing some experiments on some masks and other ventilator parts for the basically COVID-19 situation that we have here. This is another mask in the making right now. So basically, we use these 3D printers to do rapid prototyping and to develop concepts and test it very quickly. Finally, we have our CNC machine, and that CNC machine, this is a large-scale CNC machine that can be used for basically cutting and engraving in wood. This is one of the projects, for example, if you can see it. This is like a 2.5D Bahrain flag done by one of the participants here, one of the Fab technicians. You can do things like furnitures if you want. This is a furniture done completely by the CNC machine. There is no nail, no nothing in this furniture. It's only done by joints. So basically the place is very, how can I say it? It can be useful for different segments of people. So for example, if you have architecture students or you have interior decor students, they can come here and test their ideas, build their models. If you have people who are basically into circuit design and electronics, they come here and develop their ideas and their products and so on. Now I'll just, that was a very quick tour about what you're doing here. Early in this year, we also introduced a membership model. And that membership model is like similar to a gym model where people can come actually here, pay like an annual fees or a monthly fees to use the facilities and to learn about all these machines and how to use them. But unfortunately, with the COVID-19 situation right now, we decided to put it on hold until things settle down a little bit, and then we're going to be relaunching this program again. But anybody who is interested and to know more about our activities or our membership model, they can come go to our Instagram link, and there is basically they can get all the information from there. Thank you very much.
All right. So many of us have ideas. They want to convert their ideas into maybe products, maybe solutions, maybe services, whatever. How can we take the idea from the early stage of conception into the product that people can use, test, and interact with? So first of all, I'm sure most of us have, noticed a problem or seen something around them that needs a special to be addressed, that there is a need that needs someone to fulfill. Okay, so most of us have observed or noticed something that needs a solution. Maybe even we started to formulate the statement of the problem. Maybe we just wrote down there is a need for this and that, or we have wrote down that many people they need a proper way of shading while using the public transport or whatever. Okay, so there could be other a way that we represent that need into a formulated statement, but there is a way to write that statement, and we will come to address that. Maybe from that we have come up with an idea. We thought of, okay, we might use for in the case of the public transport and shading, maybe we came up with an idea of a personal foldable shading that someone can take with him from one bus stop to the other. So it's something that you take with you. You ride the bus, then you leave it in your next bus station, or basically it's you use it while you are in the bus stop, and then you leave it when you ride the bus, or other ideas. Maybe someone came up with a different idea. Maybe someone even sketched that idea or came up with even some sort of a representation for it. So as we see that from the beginning of understanding or observing a need until this stage, there are multiple stages, some of which people might take and some of which people mostly won't take. But as we go through those stages, we notice that less and less people are actually going from an idea or observing a problem into creating a physical representation or even testing that model. So in that, we want to emphasize on the basic stages of developing any product. So when you develop or come up with an idea, you have to take it into a stage where you try to analyze, try to gather some information from the users, try to observe, and then you start to formulate some kind of let's say a hypothesis, and from there you take it into a stage where you design and convert that hypothesis into something that is actually manifesting physically as a product or a service or an app or so it starts to take shape. And in that, in both the screening and the design phase, you keep on refining your idea. You keep on enhancing. You keep on trying to more and more address the users that you are targeting. And then you will create something that you could test. And to create a test, you need what's called a prototype, something physical, something that users could interact with, even an enactment of a service. So you create some scenarios and people could enact. And then you start enhancing further your prototype to a stage where it's a pre-production. And finally, before you launch it, you should have something ready and basically designed for manufacturing, using addressing all your required materials, required processes, all the lines to come up with that product and bring it to market, or supply chains, everything. Okay, this is another more detailed process. I mean, if you notice, it's going in zigzag. So we start up on the left corner and we walk our way. It's exactly the same as the previous slide, but in this one we have more details. I mean, there are many other slides that are basically different in many other processes, but they all share the same they all share the same principles. They all have certain stages that basically take you from a concept, an idea, into a stage where you analyze. Then you have basically you ideate and create a design, then you prototype, then you test. Okay, so again, it's more or less the same thing, but with more elaboration. And today we want to focus on what is called human-centered design. Why? Because we tested that. We have not only gone through it theoretically, but in practice, and we have tested it with users. We have tested it with even students, and we took people who never heard of human-centered design through the process, and they were able to come up with an idea that is basically closer to the end user needs. This is a quote from a French novelist, and it's a long quote. The main idea of that quote, he's basically taking it from the novel context, or writing from the literature point of view. But what we need from it is basically, if we are trying to develop a human-centered design product, we have to not only experience different places or go to different landscapes, but we have to use different eyes. So we try as much as possible to have the eyes of the end users. We use those eyes to come up with products that really address their needs. So many of you have heard of design thinking as a process where it actually takes you through a process. You start with a problem or a challenge. You start investigating. You do some analysis. You try to come up with some ideas. You reflect or represent those ideas into a physical manifestation. Then you test. And it is not a linear process. It's not even a circular process. I mean, in this diagram, it shows you as a circular process. But from this, you could go also from any stage of the design thinking. You could move from one to the other without any sequence. So that's, I mean, from the define stage, we could go back to the empathy, or from the ideate, we go back to the define, and from the prototype, we go back to the empathize. It's always a dynamic process, non-linear. There is a lot of going back and forth, but the most important element is that we always try to get closer to the needs and the pains of the user. So the empathy is simply, as we said, we put ourselves in the user's shoes. We try to be in their shoes, seeing things through their eyes and understanding. Empathy is all about observing and listening to the users. Defining is the stage where we take all that outcome from our interviews or interaction with the users and try to formulate a statement and to formulate a hypothesis. So in the research sense, it's basically when you start a thesis, you have to have some kind of a hypothesis. So in that, we are trying to formalize all the information we gathered from the users and putting it into a statement. And we take this statement to a phase which is mostly fun for everyone, where you start to come up with as many ideas as possible. So that's the phase where we just ideate, bring all the ideas that we can come up with to in line with what we have designed in the problem, or we came up with in the problem statement. And finally, the real fun is when you try to work with your hands and try to do things that could speak to people who can test it. Without a prototype, people can't understand or can't interact with your product. A prototype works for the end users and also works for your collaborators. It's a helpful tool for everyone. It's a tool that helps everyone interact and engage properly with the product and understand not only the aesthetics or the functional aspects, but even the emotional aspects behind it. And finally is the testing. So when we have that physical manifestation, the touch of it, the feel of it, the way we interact with it, even for an app, even for a service, even for all the things that we want to create, we can put it into a form, a physical manifestation form that people could then interact with and could test. Empathy is basically we try to understand the emotional and physical needs of the end users. We have to come closer to them. We have to understand them. Simply, we try to produce stuff that we think is suitable for our end user. Not always the case. We might end up doing something that is not reusable for that specific user. So this is a hatchet in the door, but obviously it's not meant for that dog. Again, we are designing maybe an element we think is fun, a banana-shaped slide, but it's more hazardous than it is fun for the kids, because the kids could slide simply in the middle and they get hurt. So when we empathize with the end users, we try to gather as much information as possible. There is ways to do that. Simply with the best way is to observe the exact need of that user, what this end user requires and needs, and how can we fulfill his needs with the simplest and closest solution possible. Okay, and this will lead us to creating something that is desirable, that is feasible, and it's viable. Because without being desirable and the product is also not feasible and not viable, because you can create something that is innovative, but it's nobody wants it, and in that sense it's not, in business sense it's not viable, because you are producing something that nobody wants to purchase. Okay, and if the technology you are producing the people can't interact with or don't understand easily, so again it's not feasible technically, because you develop something that is so sophisticated, maybe it has all the new technologies, but people don't understand how to interact with it. Okay, so desirability influences feasibility and viability of any product or any innovation. So the user is not really an average person. Okay, this is an interesting picture of someone who tried to create an average face of all the 2018 players in the World Cup. So he took the pictures of all the teams and he created that average picture of all each country. And as you see, they more or less all look the same, even though they have different skin tones, skin color tones, but they are almost the same. They have similar features, the eyes, the nose. So the average user is not the user you are creating for. You are creating for specific individuals, for specific people from different places with specific needs. And when we sit with the user, we have to understand exactly what they say, how they think, and we note that in something called an empathy map. Okay, so we have an empathy map where we note down what they said, what they think, what they did, and how they feel. Okay, and when we start interviewing people, we have to try as much as possible to build up towards getting the emotions from the user. So we can't just jump immediately to invoke their stories or to let them share their emotions, we have to start building it up gradually. Okay, so we should build some kind of rapport with them. Okay, so in a nutshell, this is for the empathy, we have a map that we note on all our observations from the users, and we have to think of rules that allow us to interact in a better way with the user. So we try to have a conversation, not an interview, and have questions that could ask to open up some conversation or stories, and not questions that are just they are expecting a yes or no answer. And we always have to be thinking with the mindset of a beginner. So we just have to have the curiosity and think and ask as if we don't understand anything and we don't have assumptions. This takes us to the next. Okay, we sat with the user, we have gathered all this information, we created a pile of interviews and maybe some stories and everything. How can we go through that? So in this phase, it's actually one of the most difficult phases in the design thinking process or human-centered design process, where you take all that information, you have to analyze it, you have to create, you have to come up with a problem statement, an actionable problem statement, and you create a question, a point of view question. Okay, so there is analysis, there is we should find patterns, we should look for the data, not only the qualitative data but also quantitative data, and we start building up our statement gradually, as with the why. So we always, as I started the presentation, we have to start with a why, and a why is always a question that opens for us a door into the motivations of the user, the motivations that push them to do that act or to use that product. Okay, and from there we can get into the how. So we can't start with the how. This is usually how can we build this thing for that user. We should start with why this user is doing that, and from there we can come up with the how. The why is usually driven by needs. Most of us know the Maslow's pyramid of needs. So those are the basic needs for the humans, and they start gradually from the physiological needs, the basic needs, food and health, and then safety, then social, then esteem, achievements, and reaching status and everything. This is at the final stage of the pyramid. So the people have basic needs, and we should understand those needs, and we go with them through their basic needs and try to drive from the questions what actually is their needs. How can we formulate this problem statement? Okay, so we should get as much as possible understanding and analysis of the interviews or the users, and try to formulate from what we heard something that could become a well focused problem statement. Okay, so this is an example. Okay, we need to formulate a statement in that template where we have the user, something descriptive of the user, and we put his needs as a verb. So we convert the needs to a verb, and we try to get an insight, which is not necessarily something direct from we observe, but we try to drive it from the whole observation. Insight which is basically the last thing we come up with, is not a direct statement we formulate or we get from the user. Okay, we have to understand the user and try to come closer to him to get to an insight. Okay, so I will just go through one simple example. Most of the kids today, they spend a lot of time online trying to solve their homeworks. They are not allowed to play games or to watch something online unless they finish their homework. So for those, there is a challenge. They are seven, for example, a 7-year-old would say, I hate doing my homework because it takes me forever to finish. Okay, so how can we take from that statement something that we could create a problem statement out of? So the first is the descriptive of the user. So he's a 7-year-old. He needs then a verb to complete, okay, his homework. And then this is the insight, because he wants to find more time to do other fun stuff. So basically, we could have observed that kid. He's frustrated doing his homework. He wants to finish fast. Obviously, he wants to do fun stuff. He doesn't want to continue doing his homework, but still he needs to finish his homework. So from that, we can derive a problem statement. And then we take that problem statement even further and think of a way to create our point of view question. Okay, so this is the final hypothesis we create, which is basically how might we always start with how might we. So how is basically a way to think of, we were using how because we want to think of the different ways that we could come up with solutions. Might, that means it's not something fixed. It could be something that will change. And we, because we are working on it collaboratively. So there is a team working on coming up with a solution. So the team has to come up with a solution that could be one potential solution, not the final solution, but is a potential solution for that kid. So we use also that template to create a point of view question in this format. So how might we create a way for the student to do his or her homework more efficiently in order for him or her to find more time to have fun? So we took the statement and we took from the statement a few elements. We made sure that we have the verb, okay, and we have also the exact need. He needs to complete more efficiently, okay. So he wants to have, and finally, so in order for him to have fun. So we have to say how might we create a way for the students to do his or her homework more efficiently in order for him or her to find more time to have fun. Okay. Now Ali will take over and he will talk about the idea. Okay, Ali.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Salman. Just keep the presentation with you, and whenever I cue you, just slide it, please. Okay. Now we're going to go now to the third stage, which is the ideate stage. Here, basically, what we are doing is basically trying to again make use of all the information that we got in the first two stages and take it to the third stage. In this third stage, I think one of the main key elements is basically we have to focus on quantity rather than quality. Quality will come later, but at the early stages of the ideation stage, we should focus on quantity because you want to come up with as much as ideas as possible and to examine all these ideas and try basically to address the POV statement that we actually defined in the define stage. Then how to ideate? There are so many techniques that are there basically to go about ideation. We're going to talk about some of them. One of them is basically brainstorming. I'm sure that everyone heard about brainstorming exercises at some certain point of time. When we do brainstorming, we have to keep certain elements or certain things in mind. First of all, we have to set a time limit. As I mentioned before, we have to aim for quantity, so we try to bring as much ideas as possible. No prejudgments at all. We let everybody express their ideas and their views and to voice out their opinions. We can build on each other ideas. We should try to be as visual as possible, so we can use sticky notes, we can basically draw stuff, do sketches, do simple, very, very quick prototypes or something like this, just to help create that kind of conversation between all the team members in your team, basically, who are developing these ideas. Of course, wild ideas are welcomed. Let all these wild ideas come out. Then you're going to be examining them a bit later, in later stages, to see the viability or the feasibility of such ideas. Next slide, Salman. There is another technique called worst possible idea. This is a fun technique where we try to come up with, you know, the worst ideas possible to solve that solution. And your challenge then is going to be is basically to try to turn these bad ideas to great ideas. This is a technique that basically will invoke or will promote people to think differently and try to come up with innovative solutions that are, that have an element of novelty to them, basically. Other techniques could be storyboards, could be mind maps, could be charrettes. Charrettes basically is an exercise where you take a group of people consisting of the end users, the stakeholders, the product developers, engineers. You put them in one group and you actually do an exercise together and you take them through an experience and you start getting the feedback from these guys. So everybody is going to come up with an idea from their own perspective or point of views. One element that we have to focus on in this stage is basically what I call novelty versus relevance. Why would we say that? Why, for example, we encourage even people to come up with ideas that are not relevant? What does it mean? Some people might argue, if the idea is not relevant, why should we even think about it? But the idea is basically the relevance. Usually, people are very comfortable with coming up with relevant solutions. You know, that a solution that is, you know, a generic solution that is like very logical kind of thing. But people find always difficulty to come out with novel solutions. So we try to basically encourage people to come up with novel solutions that basically maybe nobody thought about before. I mean, who thought that we might need an iPod before? This is the example of the iPod is a very good example of something that is novel and it's relevant now. Today, we cannot live without the iPods or the iPhones. So this is a combination of two. It's novel ideas and relevant also. And usually innovation is basically the intersection of these novel and relevant ideas or solutions. So once you come up with all these ideas, I mean, you're gonna have a big list of ideas. Some of them are basically much more, for example, practical or feasible than the others. You try examining these ideas and then you pick 1, 2, or 3 of these ideas and you decide to go and do prototyping these ideas. The main idea of prototyping in general is basically that you want to explore that the solutions that you are coming up with, are they actually a working solution? Are they addressing our end users' needs or not? It's very important at this stage that you don't spend too much time and effort at the early stage of prototyping. You want to do something like you want to fail fast and prototype fast. Failing fast will help you. If you do a simple prototype and then you realize quick enough that this prototype or this idea might not work, then that means you save yourself a lot of time rather than going into a product development, developing a full working prototype for a product, take it to market and then fail. The expense or the cost of this failure is much more than what we are trying to do here. Prototyping in general is basically creating a physical representation of your solution. It's creating something that the user can actually interact with. This is very important. We need the engagement of the end user. Okay, we want to test the features of that solution that we have. As I mentioned, we should be able to fail fast and often until we come up with something that we believe is going to work and is going to have a potential to go to market. Next slide, Salman. I'll give you an example of a prototype. This is the Apple one, 1975. That was their prototype. And then you can see the next image. This is the actual Apple one, basically, as you can see it. So from that prototype, they converted it to something similar to that. This is a prototype of a water gun developed by someone called Noy Johnson. He is the creator of these water guns. So as you can see, this is a very simple prototype, but it's functional. People can use it, can test it. He built it out of very simple PVC pipes, maybe a cola bottle, very, very simple thing, but it does the job. People can actually interact with it. They can test it. He can get immediate feedback from the users whether this is something that's going to be workable or not. And in the next slide, you can see the end product. So this is very similar to the prototype, but this is your end product. This is something that went very popular. I mean, these water guns are, you can see them everywhere. And this is the actual inventor of this water gun that you can see here. Now, there are so many types of prototyping that you can do. This is a mock-up of an app, for example. You don't have to really, for example, go and develop an app to prove a concept. You can do a very simple mock-up with papers and sticky notes and stuff like that. Take people through the experience, get their feedback, and then you can take it further. What is a prototype? A prototype could be in any form or factor. You can go with something that is called a low fidelity prototype, like what I showed you before, like the mock-up. It could be a sketch, it could be an animation, it could be just an articraft with some kind of cardboards or stuff like these. It could be a mock-up of an experience, for example. So you can do a setup, a simple setup of a service or an experience, and you can share it with people. So it could be a low fidelity that basically doesn't take you so much time and doesn't cost you a lot of money to do it. And you can get relatively quick feedback from the end users. We have something called an MVP, a minimal viable product. This is a bit, I would call it a high fidelity prototype. An MVP is something that has the minimal or some of the main features of your end product. It's very close to the end product that can actually be launched into the market. So as you can see from this image, it should have the minimum features. It has to have sufficient basically elements and features that people can actually interact with. It is something very tangible. People can actually touch and feel and use. So this is what we call a minimal viable product that can actually give you a much more basically in-depth feedback from client and customers and end users. When you create a prototype, there are some basic rules that you have to basically try to follow. One of them is basically, in the beginning, don't try to think too much, just start building something. Even with very basic tools and techniques that you have, papers, cardboards, clips, whatever that you have that can help you to basically develop the early stage of your prototype. Don't spend too much time on it in the beginning. As I mentioned, just try to develop something and start sharing it with people to get some kind of feedback from them. Always remember who you're testing for. So this goes back to your early stages of product development and the empathy stage or the define stage. Think of your end user, keep him at the center of your exercises and your tasks, and basically try to design for them. Then once you develop these prototypes, actually you can go and test it with the end users. When you test it with the end users, there are so many ways to do these kind of things, depending on the type of prototype you have. For example, if you have an MVP, you can have an MVP, share it with your end users, let them use it. When you gather these, you can gather the information by interviews, by taking notes, by talking to the people themselves, by actually sometimes videotaping their experience and their behavior and their reaction to the product. All of these are methods for you to gather the information and the feedback. And when you gather this information and the feedback, the most important part of it is basically it's going to give you a lot of insight about your solutions. Sometimes you will decide that no, the solution that you had in mind in the early stages is not going to be the solution that's actually going to sell. So you have to go back to your model again and you go through an iterative process. As Salman mentioned in the beginning, the design thinking methodology is not something linear. It is basically you can access any of these elements at any time. So today, if you did the testing and you found out some insights from your testing that the user, for example, is not happy about this certain feature, then you go back to the prototyping stage and try to redefine or refine your prototype again, and then test again, and do that on and on again until you reach to something that you are comfortable that, yes, this might be a solution that's going to be both feasible, viable, and desirable by the end users. For the testing rules, there are some basic things that you have to take into account. You have to make sure that the user understands how the prototype works. Don't try to over-explain. You have to try as much as possible to have your prototype self-explanatory so it can explain itself, and you just want to sit and observe. You don't want to intervene into that testing phase. Just let the people test it and you get the feedback from them. And of course, you can always ask follow-up questions in order for you to get a better insight about your solution and your